Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of Asexual and Sexual Reproduction Week. Today we are going to be looking specifically at sexual reproduction. So, step 1 here, we're going to talk about variation. Look around, well, don't look around at your classmates, you're probably sitting in your room right now, but if you remember the last time you've seen your classmates, you video chatted with some of your friends, you could probably tell if you looked carefully that we all have different characteristics. Different hair colors, different eye colors, different heights, weights, sizes, everything. Even people in your family, you would look at your brother, sister, mom, dad, whatever. All your family members are also different. You do not look like the same person. This difference in characteristics is called variation. Variation, well, it's just the difference in characteristics between individuals in a population. So you got a whole bunch of people, they're all going to look a little different from each other. And it's not just looks. Variation is for everything, right? It could also be for your immune system, for how well you digest food, like everything. Variation is across all things that you can see and not see. Anyway, sexual reproduction. This is our big topic for the day. You're going to see in a minute why we started talking about variability, but what is it? Sexual reproduction is reproduction that involves the fusion of two reproductive cells, gametes, in the process of fertilization. So, what is fertilization? The actual definition of it? It's the process by which gametes from two parents combine to form one new cell. So two parent cells combine, they make one new cell. Now, sexual reproduction normally requires two parents, one male and the other female. That's kind of your standard go-to for sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, the reason that it is so useful and so important, and the reason why it's what a lot of organisms do, is because it generates variability. We're talking about variations. This variability, those variations, come from sexual reproduction. If you're not doing sexual reproduction, you're not getting variability. And variability is really important. If you remember the banana from last unit, very important. So, what are gametes? Well, it's just a specialized cell used for reproduction. We talked about this. We briefly touched on it last lesson in asexual reproduction, but we're going to go into it a lot more because they're more important here. So, gametes are formed by meiosis. You cannot make them. Everything else, every other cell is made by mitosis. Your skin cells, muscle cells, brain cells, everything. It's all mitosis. But your gametes, they're the only cells in your body that are going to be made by meiosis. Now, in males, your gametes are known as sperm cells. In females, the gametes are known as egg cells. Sometimes also called ova. That's a more scientific name for egg cells. So if you hear someone talk about ova, or anything with ova in it, tends to have to do with egg cells. Like ovary, for example, probably has something to do with egg cells, right? So sexual reproductive animals, or plants for that matter, organisms, produce gametes in reproductive organs, and we call those organs gonads. That is the scientific term for them. In males, the gonads are known as the testes, and in females, the gonads are known as the ovaries. Those are the locations in the human body where gametes are produced. Now, there are some animals called hermaphrodites. They have both the male and the female reproductive organs. So they have both gonads, both ovaries and testes, in each individual. An example of this would be a flatworm. There's also like 21 different species of fish that do this, including clownfish, like Nemo. So I don't know. Yeah, why not? Let's ruin Nemo for you guys. A scientific article, I can't remember who it was, but there was a scientist or a scientific journal or something, they did a little write-up on what would happen if the movie Finding Nemo was scientifically accurate, and it was a little bit horrifying. Because clownfish are hermaphrodites, what they do is they actually switch which sex they have depending on the needs of the population. So the way Nemo would actually go is that Nemo is born as neither male nor female. He's born as an undifferentiated fish because he's going to change depending on the needs of the population. Nemo's dad, on the other hand, just had his mate killed. I think it was eaten by a barracuda, right? So Nemo's dad is now alone. There's no female. So what happens with clownfish is Nemo's dad would transition to become a female. So his testes would stop functioning and his ovaries would or her now, I don't know. It's confusing with gender roles with clownfish. But would go from testes to ovaries. So it would be Nemo's dad would now be considered a female of the species. So with Nemo growing up, Nemo's dad would now be Nemo's mom, I guess, the female. And so Nemo would have to be, when it came time for Nemo to develop into either female or male, because there's now a female around, Nemo would differentiate into a male. That way, the two of them could reproduce to keep the species going, because that's what clownfish do. Kind of weird, kind of gross. But that's the way things work with hermaphrodites. They will switch back and forth in the animal kingdom to ensure that there is always the ability to do sexual reproduction, because this means you can keep the species going with variation. Now, generally speaking with hermaphrodites, as we said, like Nemo's dad would switch from male to female organs. Generally speaking, there is only one set of gonads functional at a time. However, there are a few animals that can self-fertilize if both sets are functional. Like earthworms are one example. So hermaphrodites are actually really common in the animal kingdom. It's a pretty standard way to make sure that there are always partners around. If you had a room full of males, one or more would just switch to become female, and then sexual reproduction can happen, and the species can continue. But let's concentrate on humans here, because that's kind of the main focus here of human reproduction. So here's your steps required. You want to have sexual reproduction happen with human beings. This is what needs to happen. First, meiosis produces gametes. If you don't have sex cells, you don't have sperm cells and egg cells, it's not going to work for you. Second thing that happens, you need to have a male gamete, so a sperm cell, combined with a female gamete, an egg. If those cells aren't combining, you're not going to get fertilization happening. Now, once you have sperm plus egg, you get something called a zygote, which is a single cell. That single cell, that zygote, it develops then into an embryo. So the zygote's the new cell formed by fertilization. It's down there. And an embryo is a fertilized egg during its early development. So it starts with the zygote, which is your single cell. Once that zygote starts to divide and becomes more cells through mitosis, then it's going to be called an embryo. And that embryo is going to continue to develop through mitosis. And some of those cells are going to, after dividing, they're going to start specializing. They're going to start becoming muscle cell, skin cell, organ cell, bone cell. Once you start developing bone cell, we actually switch the terminology from embryo to fetus, but that's kind of like a technical thing. Some people give it more of a time frame. Some people say it's based on when bone cells developed. It's just kind of we're through a certain phase of development. But it goes zygote, then embryo, then to fetus later. Now, for this to actually work, for sexual reproduction to be successful, you need three big things. Male and female gametes arrive in the same place. Male and female gametes are there at the same time. Otherwise, fertilization wouldn't occur. And that zygote needs to be protected, fed, everything. It needs food, moisture, warmth, and protection. Those are really important. In human beings, we have a really easy system for this. We just keep the actual zygote inside the female body, where it is always kept the same temperature. It can receive what's always moist in there. It's protected because it's inside a body, and it receives food eventually through an umbilical cord. And so we've got a system set up as human beings to make that pretty foolproof. But not all animals do that. In animals, there's two main patterns of fertilization. There is external and internal. Now, external fertilization, the sperm and the egg, meet outside the bodies of both parents. Now, this is really common among water-dwelling animals like fish. Now, water-dwelling is kind of our key word there, because sperm cells need to swim to meet the egg. And if you're going to try doing that on land, out in the air, it's not going to have very much luck, right? So you're not going to really get external fertilization happening on land. It's just not going to work out. The logistics of it are not very easy. But in water, a fish can literally just lay an egg and it'll just sink to the bottom of a river or a pond or a lake or whatever. And the male can come by and just like crop dust it with sperm as he swims over. And those sperm can swim the way around, find some eggs, and boom, you've got a whole bunch of fertilized fish eggs. So that only works if you're in water. In internal fertilization, That's when the sperm travels from a male's body into the female's body to meet and join with the egg inside the female's body. Now, this is way, way, way more common among your land-dwelling animals, such as humans. Because again, we don't have water, we'd have no way to make the sperm actually travel anywhere because it needs some liquid to swim in. And so we, humans, and most other land-dwelling mammals, use internal fertilization. Actually, before we talk chromosomes, let's talk external fertilization for one more second here. Another trade-off to this external fertilization thing, humans, when we're going to have babies, we usually have one. Sometimes, twins, sometimes triplets, but it's kind of one at a time deal because we protect it, we feed it, we nourish it, all that kind of good stuff. Fish take the opposite approach. A fish is going to lay probably 1,000 eggs and leave them lying in the bottom of a pond. And then a fish is going to swim by, fertilize all those eggs, and you're going to have 1,000 potential offspring. So why don't the number of fish just explode through the roof? Well, it's because the fish don't actually have a system in place to feed those eggs, to protect those eggs, to do anything to actually make sure their offspring grow into fish. So of those 1,000 eggs, probably 500 of them get washed out somewhere to sea. Another 300 of them get eaten by predators because they're just sitting there. There's no protection for them. A bunch of them probably die from exposure because the eggs don't have enough protection just sitting out on the seabed. And so of all those eggs, only a small percent actually end up becoming offspring. So whereas humans are we're going to stick with one or two, actually most of your land-dwelling internal fertilization creatures, we're going to stick with a small number of babies and just make sure we take care of them. A lot of the external fertilization animals will just I'm going to have 1,000 babies, but I'm just also not going to care for them, and they can figure it out themselves. So it's just two different kind of methodologies of reproduction between internal and external. But here's the problem. Let's talk chromosomes for a second. Our cells have 46 chromosomes. If two cells come together, sperm plus egg, we should have 92, right? And so I got 92 chromosomes in this zygote, and if this zygote does mitosis, its two cells will both have 92. And those cells would have 92, and on and on and on. There's no way to reduce the chromosome count. Which means if 92 chromosome guy decides to have a baby with another 92, suddenly your chromosome number's up to 184. And every generation, you would double the number of chromosomes. Now that is obviously not going to work. So what do we have to do to actually make fertilization occur successfully? Well, the 46 chromosomes we have are actually 23 pairs. And these are very similar chromosomes called homologous pairs, one from mom and one from dad. So what this means is I don't have an eye color chromosome. Well, I'd have an eye color gene on a chromosome. I would have two chromosomes with eye color information on them. One from mom, one from dad. And so you don't have 46 different chromosomes. You only have 23, but they're all paired up. One has mom's information, one has some of dad's information on it. And that information combined is what makes you who you are. And we'll figure out whose is in charge, mom's or dad's, later when we talk genetics. So body cells, your 46 chromosomes, are called diploid cells. I know we've talked about this already, but it never hurts to refresh some of our terminology. And gametes only have 23. They have half the amount, so they're haploid cells. So what we do is we don't take all 46 chromosomes, we only take half. We make sure we get one from each set. So if we were to number these, this is chromosome 1, chromosome 2, chromosome 3, chromosome 4, and remember I have one from mom, one from dad. For each of them, I would take one of each pair. Doesn't matter which one. We'll take one of each pair to make sure I do have all the information I need. But then I've only have 23 chromosomes. I've got a haploid gamete, which means two haploid gametes, sperm cell plus egg cell, equals a full diploid zygote, a 46 chromosome zygote. It's got all the chromosomes you need. And it's got one from mom, one from dad. So how do we lose half our chromosomes? Well, that was last week's stuff, right? If mitosis keeps making diploid cells with the same number, there must be another process. And of course, that process is meiosis. That's why we did that first, because it's so fundamental to how this stuff works. Meiosis does 2 cell divisions, gives you haploid gametes from your diploid body cells. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of meiosis, because again, that was last week's stuff. You can always review that if you'd like. But I will make a note here. Little side information. In males, this is human males. I'm not sure if it's true for all males. Might be. But definitely in human males, you have 4 non-identical nuclei produced. So I would start with 1 cell, and it divides twice, gives you 4 non-identical sperm cells. All of them mature into functioning sperm. Life is good. However, in females, I can actually highlight that they all mature into sperm. In females, you still have 4 non-identical nuclei. So this splits. But they only one of the cells receives enough cytoplasm, that's the liquid in the inside of the cell, to mature into an egg. So this is actually what egg cells look like. One of them hogs all the cytoplasm. So even though they're all genetically different, only one of them survives. The other ones don't become eggs. You only get 1 egg cell, and it is much bigger. So your sperm cells, they have to split everything even, so they will be a much smaller cell. Your ova, your egg cells, will be much larger. In males, your meiosis occurs continuously in the testes once gonads are sexually mature. So once a guy hits puberty, they start pumping out sperm cells, and that's going to keep happening forever. In females, meiosis begins in the ovary before birth and then stops until the age of puberty, when it starts up again. So they actually start early, then they take a break, and then meiosis kicks off again during puberty when it starts off to mature those eggs. Do I have a slide on? Oh yeah, there's our picture, a little bit better. So the egg cells that don't turn into, well, I guess more the nucleus that don't turn into egg cells are called polar bodies. And then you get 1 single egg. And now this should be much larger. These sperm cells should be much smaller than the egg cell here. But there's our diagram again. I don't have the information in there. I thought I did. One thing before I get onto this slide here to note is that males will produce their sex cells continuously forever. So guys don't run out. Like a 90-year-old man still is producing functional sperm cells. Theoretically could father children. Females, however, do have a bit of a time limit. They don't have an unlimited number of egg cells. And so they do reach a point where they stop releasing egg cells and stop being able to have children. That is called menopause. That is the name for when egg cells stop being released. And so if you had a 90-year-old woman, they would no longer be able to have children theoretically. Anyways, back to the topic at hand here. When the sex cell from mom, the egg, the ova, is combined with the sex cell from the father, the sperm, during fertilization, the 2 haploid cells combine to form a diploid cell, your zygote. That cell receives 1 member of each homologous pair. Homologous pair is your chromosome pairs. Remember, we had 23 pairs of different ones. So you get 1 of chromosome 1 from mom and 1 from dad. 1 of chromosome 2 from mom and 1 from dad. 1 of chromosome 3 from mom, 1 from dad. So 1 of all 23 from mom, 1 of all 23 from dad. That's where your 46 are coming from. I know we've seen this before, or something close to it, because you've done meiosis already. But generally, here's what you got. Things condense. You got a little bit of crossing over happening as well. So the first split happens. So I've got, this would actually, what would this be? A 4 chromosome cell? Oh, it'd be a 2 chromosome. And then, so yeah, then meiosis continues. And before there's no DNA replication, they split again immediately. So it just lines them up, rips these X shapes right in half. And so you get a single one from mom and 1 of the ones from dad in each cell. And so if you look at these 4 cells here, they're all different. A big light blue and a small dark blue, a big dark blue and a small light blue. And these ones have different sizes. So all 4 of those cells have different patterns to them. So not only can you get a different mix of chromosome 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, like you get mom's 1 and 3 and dad's 2 and 4, but you can also get, oh man, this has like part of mom's and part of dad's on it. So you get virtually a limitless selection of the different genes you could possibly express, which is why even siblings don't look the same. You're like, yeah, I got the same stuff from mom and the same stuff from dad. Shouldn't it be basically identical? Shouldn't there be a pretty good chance of looking or acting or being very similar genetically to your brother or sister? But because of this crossing over, it's virtually impossible. The odds would be 1 in billions, actually probably less than that even, of you actually being similar to someone genetically because of how much crossing over and mixing and matching there can actually be. And this crazy mixing and matching and different stuff, this is what creates all that variation. The reason why sexual reproduction is so desirable and why you get so much variation in your population from it, because there's so many different ways you can combine the 23 chromosomes from mom and the 23 from dad. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and that wraps up our sexual reproduction lesson.